My family, of course, are basically the poster children for the Jew store. The Jew store is a Jewish store in the middle of downtown usually, often in small towns across America. All of these Jewish immigrants came to this country with certain skills. And they knew if they left the big cities and went to smaller towns, their skills would be beyond what anybody else in those cities often had. And so my family was no difference. First one settling in Chicago before realizing they would do better in smaller areas. One family was in Nashville, doing fairly well, and ended up having to leave during parts of an earlier depression. But they all ended up in small towns because they knew how to do retail. And a lot of people in these towns didn't. So if you go around, and I only have experience in Texas mostly, but you go all around Texas, you find all these towns, and their downtowns were started by Jews, or the Jews were very prominent in downtown, and then eventually the next generation either takes over the store or becomes professionals, and then the generation after that usually becomes professionals. And that is exactly what happened in my family. They went from schmata and junk to eventually furniture and sporting goods. And eventually all of their children went into becoming professors and teachers, and a few of them did stay in the retail business, but most of them have gone into other fields. So very, very common. The big difference is my hometown, McAllen, Texas, has continued to grow. It's a booming small city that has now become a mid-sized city. You go to most of these areas where they had the Jew stores, most of the Jews have left. And often the synagogues have been closed down, and of course the Jew store is now owned by somebody else. Where I'm from, McAllen, actually more Jews have moved down there, so there's actually a larger Jewish population now than when I grew up, which is very rare.
What's so unusual about this story is that Jews have to live in community in order for them to do the ritualistic things that they need to do as Jews. So if they're individuals that move to these areas where the general population might not have been familiar with Jews and Jewish rituals and practices, how difficult was it for them to maintain their Judaism in these circumstances?
Well, I think it wasn't if they really wanted it. Because generally you come into these areas, and since there were so few Jews in the community, they all found each other. My community ended up with maybe 85 families. So enough to create a synagogue, to really be a lay-led synagogue, even though they often had a rabbi, to be a community where if you wanted to be Jewish, you just had to go out of your way to do it. And in all these communities, they found ways to come together, celebrate holidays. I know personally I had, there were 85 families in our community. I had 85 Jewish mothers then. So we become very tight, and that's pretty much your Judaism is centered in the synagogue. And all these small towns had at least one synagogue, or they went nearby to a nearby town that had a synagogue. So it's a wonderful way to grow up because everybody knows each other, everybody's connected. Growing up in McAllen, Texas, there was really no prejudice against Jews at all, at least not when I grew up. And my dad grew up there, and he didn't remember any, and my grandfather moved there. My great-grandparents lived there, and they really didn't see very much. So it was a nice way to grow up, and I'm sure when they were founding the community, it's not only that you find other Jews, but my Uncle Sam moved to McAllen, and when the Depression hit, my grandfather, his brother-in-law, moved down there because he had a job for him, and then another family member moved down there, and pretty soon you have an entire Haas family down there, and then plus the Lack family, which is another side of my family, and so just with my family there was probably 30 people. And so right there you have a small community, and then other people doing the same thing. So it's a different way of growing up for many people who are used to being in big cities, but it's a great place to grow up. Unfortunately, most of these towns again have lost or are losing most of their Jews because of course jobs and Jews now are in the big cities. But again, for the generation, my generation, and especially the generations that came before me, it was a wonderful way to live and a great option. You could really practice your profession, as a merchant. You could be a big macher in the community, well respected. The housing costs were minimal compared to living in New York or Chicago. So it was really a nice way to live your life.
In the South, and when you read books like The Jew Store, they talk about, there was the Ku Klux Klan and other types of organizations like that were quite prevalent, but they pretty much left the Jew and the Jew Store alone, although there was anti-Semitism in a different way, in that Jews were not able to join certain organizations or maybe some sports teams. That form of more subtle anti-Semitism, do you have any experience with that, or do you remember your parents ever talking about that?
Well, I think in this case we are a little atypical. If you go around certain places in Texas and other places I've been, they have had those instances. I know in a lot of the big cities there's still a country club that Jews are not allowed to join, and you find that clubs were off limits to Jews. I'm coming from a small town on the border with Mexico, so we really didn't have this anti-Semitism. There was a lot of issues between the Mexican population and the Anglo population coming from the north, and that was really where the issues came in. By the time I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that was all starting to calm down. But I know when my dad was growing up, the big issue was, are you, what you call Latino or Hispanic or Mexican, or are you what they would call white? And the Jews counted as being white if you were from Eastern Europe, and if you were more, if you were Spanish and you spoke Spanish, you would have been counted as being, on the other side. For instance, my dad was kicked out of the pool, the community pool, because he was very dark, and they thought he was, Mexican. So my grandfather had to walk my dad back to the pool and tell the people in charge of the pool that we're white. And that was just the way it was, and as time has gone on, of course, things have changed, thank goodness. But as far as being Jewish, there really wasn't any anti-Semitism that I know of or I've heard of. A lot of the immigrants had Eastern European accents, but everybody else down there had some sort of accent. You had a Texas accent, you had an accent from Mexico or maybe somewhere else in Central South America. So very interesting place to grow up. And I know there were a lot of issues. In fact, in the 80s and 90s, it was when they first really started solving a lot of these problems.
So, we deal with stories here of segregation, and so I talked to a lot of people who remember the civil rights movement, even if they didn't participate, because they remembered when schools started to integrate. It sounds like in your area, first of all, it was segregated Mexican, Latino, and white, but was it also segregated with the black community?
There really wasn't a black community. We didn't have, if you had a military base, some of the other border towns up north had a military base, so you might have that, but we didn't really have. Now there is, but back then it was a small town, and you got to remember the percentages aren't like the percentages here in the Old South. I mean, we're probably talking, if we go just white to Mexican, and those are words I don't like to use, but I think that's what they would have been used 50 years ago. We're talking 15% white and 85% Mexican. So the power structure was very skewed toward the white when the Mexican population was by far the majority. And again, that started to change as people started to vote in the 70s and 80s, and things became a little bit more balanced.
In this community, we extended ourselves for Russian Jews and given money for Ethiopian resettlement in Israel. And in your town, were you more in tune with conversos and Sephardic Jews, perhaps, that ended up in South American countries or Central American countries? And was there any type of conversation or work that you did to try and open up dialogue?
Not as much as people might think. I think a lot of people assume all the Jews in Mexico are Sephardic, and that is not true. A lot of the Jews in Mexico are actually Ashkenazic and just couldn't get into America for whatever reason. They ended up accidentally in Mexico. And so when I was growing up, by far most people were Ashkenazic, even though there was certainly a small group of Sephardic Jews, both Ashkenazic and Sephardic, those spoke Spanish, because it was a bilingual congregation. Now, years later, as the population has grown and a lot of Jews have moved in from Mexico, South America, and Central America, it's a much larger Sephardic population. But yeah, there were Sephardic Jews. We did have a mix of Spanish and English, and but I think I would say probably the majority of Jews who had some descent from Mexico were Ashkenazic, because a lot of their families had been through the Holocaust or left before the Holocaust from Europe.
What's your earliest memory of Jewish food, and how did it make you feel?
Let's see, I don't know what my earliest memory is, but I do know my next door neighbors, the Levines, who still live in the same house. We were next door neighbors for years, of course. They had these wonderful tasting hot dogs that they called kosher hot dogs. I had no idea what it meant, the word kosher, because we didn't keep kosher at all. But all I know is these hot dogs tasted really good, and they were the only ones who had kosher hot dogs. And so that's one of my great memories. The other one, of course, is all the Jewish food that I assumed other people were eating, but nobody else was eating. I mean, I was eating lox and bagels before anyone else in the community. I remember going to college. I went to the University of Texas, it's a giant school, 60,000 people. And my second year, I was living with my roommate, and he was from Houston, big city, not Jewish. And I went to buy the microwave, he went to buy the toaster, he brings the toaster in, and it's got these really tiny slots. And I asked him, well, how am I going to fit my bagels in there? And he asked, what's a bagel? And this was in the late 80s. So, we were already eating bagels. It filtered in from New York. So bagels and lox and cream cheese and, all of these things we were eating. I never understood, though, that it came from this Jewish Eastern European mix, because I was fourth generation American. So I had nobody in my entire family with an accent who had even really known anybody with an accent except when they were kids. So
how did you know you were Jewish?
We had a thriving synagogue that's there to this day. Everything went through the synagogue. Everybody in my family did something in the synagogue. My grandfather was president, my uncle was president, my dad was ritual chair, my other uncle was on every committee, so always connected to synagogue. My family was there when it was founded. I still have a little family there, although my last two relatives down there will probably be moving the next couple of years. So everybody was connected through the synagogue, everything. I had never heard of a Jewish community center. Of course, they were connected to the Jewish world, especially with Israel. So when it came to Israel bonds and dedication, for Zionist causes, that was very big. And so especially JNF and those kind of organizations. B'nai B'rith was big, Hadassah was big. So we had some connection to the rest of the world, but this is a long time ago, and although there were airplanes and roads, McAllen at that time was 5 hours south of San Antonio. A lot of people think San Antonio is the end of the world. McAllen is 5 hours south, so for us to go anywhere, if I wanted to go to Houston, it was a 7-hour drive. Back then, not on freeways like they have now, but on sometimes less navigable roads. So we were kind of out there in the boonies by ourselves. So we were in the real South, in other words.
As opposed to all of us who just pretend to be.
You're in like the northern South.
When you were growing up, children were bar mitzvah and confirmed?
Yes, everybody was. It was automatic. You didn't have a choice. I only knew one guy who had got out of the confirmation, and he was a rough character, and somehow he managed to, I had no idea how, we were all very impressed.
You're young enough that you might actually remember, did you enjoy any of this, or it was all forced upon you? And what did it mean to you?
It was, I enjoyed it, quite frankly. I had the big class, we had like 5 or 6 people. We were kind of misbehaved a lot, so we always got the best teacher, which was nice. And I enjoyed it, we had a good time, we learned a lot. Of course, I would have preferred to stay home and watch Mexican wrestling, which was on Sunday morning, or Texas wrestling, either one of those. But we had a good time, and even though I had friends who were not Jewish, this ensured that I had Jewish friends, because I wouldn't always have hung around with the other Jews. We had some similarities, but other things we didn't. We weren't always in the same groups, but we always had the synagogue. So we went there through confirmation. Let me pause for a second.
Maybe
all their lives, and they know so much about the Jewish people and the Jewish things that go on here, which I don't know.
So where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
My last one was in Florida. I came from Florida here.
Yeah. Where, like in Boca?
Delray Beach,
Beach,
Florida.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I know
came
more.
from there here.
Yeah.
And this is my very first time that I've ever been in Georgia at all, whether it was Savannah or Atlanta or any place.
So the truth is that
I had friends who were not Jewish. This ensured that I had Jewish friends because I wouldn't always have hung around with the other Jews. We had some similarities, but other things we didn't. We weren't always in the same groups, but we always had the synagogue. So we went there through confirmation. I'm going to pause for a second. I turned
Maybe all their lives, and they know so much about the Jewish people and the Jewish things that go on here, which I don't know.
So where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
My last one was in Florida. I came from Florida here.
Yeah. Where, like in Boca?
Delray Beach,
Beach,
Florida.
yeah.
And this is my very first time that I've ever been in Georgia at all, whether it was Savannah or Atlanta or any place.
So the truth is that
I had friends who were not Jewish. This ensured that I had Jewish friends because I wouldn't always have hung around with the other Jews. We had some similarities, but other things we didn't. We weren't always in the same groups, but we always had the synagogue. So we went there through confirmation. I'm going to pause for a second. I turned
Maybe all their lives, and they know so much about the Jewish people and the Jewish things that go on here, which I don't know.
So where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
My last one was in Florida. I came from Florida here.
Yeah. Where, like in Boca?
Delray Beach,
Beach,
Florida.
yeah.
And this is my very first time that I've ever been in Georgia at all, whether it was Savannah or Atlanta or any place.
So the truth is that
I had friends who were not Jewish. This ensured that I had Jewish friends because I wouldn't always have hung around with the other Jews. We had some similarities, but other things we didn't. We weren't always in the same groups, but we always had the synagogue. So we went there through confirmation. I'm going to pause for a second. I turned
Maybe all their lives, and they know so much about the Jewish people and the Jewish things that go on here, which I don't know.
So where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
My last one was in Florida. I came from Florida here.
Yeah. Where, like in Boca?
Delray Beach, Florida.
Beach, yeah.
And this is my very first time that I've ever been in Georgia at all, whether it was
Was your family surprised that you wanted to be a rabbi? What was the reaction?
I think shocked was definitely the reaction. I'd already shocked him once when I told him I wasn't going to go to law school and was going to be an elementary school teacher. And I'd shocked him when I told him I was moving to Israel. So shocking them was something I was pretty good at doing. Now remember, I'm from a small town. Basically you went to the University of Texas, then you either went to law school or maybe got your MBA, and then you go and live in Houston or San Antonio, and that was kind of, or stayed in Austin, that was kind of what you did back then. I don't think parents of my generation realized all of us kids might start moving to New York or California or go abroad, and that there were no limits to what we would do. So all of this was shocking, and then I, of course, called him from Israel and said I've decided to apply to rabbinical school, and I think that was probably the biggest shock of all. But considering how often I did it towards as I grew, that was probably not as much of a shock as it could have been. But they were very supportive.
We talk about the future of Judaism as being not an assured thing. When I talk to people from the South, we talk about how anti-Semitism in some ways, or restrictions, kept them all together in Jewish clubs and Jewish organizations, had them create dances so Jews can meet other Jews. As the generations went on, Jews becoming more accepted, people can join any club they want, and they don't always select the Jewish option. They can go to any camp they want. They don't always select a Jewish option. They can go to, any dance, any school, participate in any sport. In some ways, has our acceptance in American Jewry anyway, as Jews and as Americans, made it more difficult to keep our children Jewish?
Well, I think it definitely has. I think the numbers speak for themselves. I think it's an irony. All of our ancestors wanted Jews to be able to live in a world where they had total freedom and could be Jewish without any restrictions from the outside world, and they succeeded brilliantly. My great-grandparents and grandparents and parents did wonderful things, and now I can do anything I want, even stop being Jewish and meld away and become part of any other group. However, I still think it's better this way. I think I prefer the option of leaving to being forced to do anything. So what it has done to the Jewish world is put us in a sense of crisis, as we know, but has given us the kick needed to get us moving in the right direction. I think we kind of rested on the laurels. You had to be Jewish, you had to come to the Jewish Country Club, you had to be in the Jewish youth group, there were no other options. And now that there are other options, we have to now become creative and engaging and really go out there and teach and create a vibrant Judaism if we want to maintain it. And we didn't have to do that, I think, always before because there were no choices, but now there are. So I think in many ways we have lost some people, but in many ways we have gained people and gained more dedicated Jews because we do so much more. If you look at a programming calendar in any synagogue in this country and compare it to that synagogue 50 years ago, I guarantee you we are doing a lot more today. If you look at creative programming today versus 50 years ago, you're going to find synagogues have tried everything and more to create a congregation where people feel comfortable. So it's a two-edged sword. Yes, it is bad that people are leaving and that the freedom we've been given creates a sense of I can do whatever, but it's also good in that it's created a more vibrant Judaism today than ever before.
Part of what we do is who we are, and vice versa. There are so many precepts of Judaism that we live, whether it's our belief in Tikkun Olam, or whether it's a belief in ethical living, or education, or doing mitzvot. Can you give some examples from your own life where what you studied really became what you did?
Well, I think that's pretty much everyone's life. I mean, no matter what you study, no matter what you do in life, I think it all becomes a part of you and adds to who you're going to become. I think, from my perspective, being so dedicated to the synagogue when I was growing up, even though I didn't always want to go, even though I didn't always figure out the reason we were going. My parents were not especially religious. They didn't know what kosher was. That instilled in me this connection to the synagogue that when I did finally have choices, I chose to be connected to the synagogue in the Jewish world. It's the same thing with volunteering. The more I volunteered because a class in college required me to do so, or because my rabbinical school required me to do so, or because my parents required me to do so, instilled this need to contribute to the outside world. So I think the more lessons we learn as we go along, the more we become what we learn. And I think if we learn how to be good people, how to devote ourselves to Judaism, how to devote ourselves to people in need, then we are going to be more apt to do these things on our own as we grow up. And I think that's pretty much a common knowledge. I know I've lived it myself, that I've seen, my parents did to me sometimes, and I'd say no, let's say that all the time I didn't understand what they were doing to me. But now looking back, I see it was, for the best. And it's really incumbent about our parents to show, demonstrate, model, teach our kids. And I think for me, the whole community did it. And I think that's pretty much consistently how it's gone in rabbinical school when they teach you about tikkun olam. Well, you also have volunteer opportunities. So I decided I volunteered a lot in rabbinical school at UCLA Hospital. Why? Because I took a class that taught us the importance of chaplaincy. When I was, in high school and decided to become an elementary school teacher for the religious school, I learned that I really enjoyed working with kids. And so when I went to college, even though I was really studying to be a lawyer, I started volunteering at schools to teach kids, really after-school programs. I worked at a daycare center. I taught religious school, and I became a youth leader because I had figured out I liked kids or working with kids when I was a teacher for our religious school.
Tell me about Jewish travel. Either places that you've gone where you were on some type of mission, or you were on some type of Jewish journey, or where you were doing some type of mitzvah project, but how it connected to you Jewishly.
Well, I'm actually quite addicted to traveling, as many people know. So I've gone to a lot of places and seen a lot of Jewish sites and communities. I've led trips for Federation. I've gone on trips with Federation to Israel. The world is an oyster, a kosher oyster of Jewish opportunities to see the world, but also to see our past. And I think, especially in the last 20 years, we see people now more and more wanting to go and see where we came from as Jews. How did other Jews do it? How did other Jews look at the world? And so I've led several trips and gone to a lot of places, and every place is unique. Whether I'm leading a group of 80 kids who are going to be seniors in high school to Israel, many of whom just want to party. They realize there's more to going to Israel than just that, to whether I'm going to holiday services in India when I took a year off to travel around the world and just found this synagogue in Delhi and became very friendly with the family and people there. And I was going to go to Mumbai for Yom Kippur, but I stayed in Delhi for Yom Kippur. So I got to know people. It was really quite wonderful. Whether you're going to Europe and seeing what has happened to this vibrant Jewish community that has almost disappeared, you still have these magnificent synagogues, you still have all of these places set up for tourists, but then you also realize that there's just very few Jews. You go to Poland, there's only a couple of thousand Jews in the country. What were there, 3 million before the war? Maybe even there were more. You go all over Europe and you see all these beautiful buildings. I was just in Prague last year. I'd been there before. These beautiful synagogues, and really only one of them are being used anymore. So it's a wonderful thing to see the past, but it's also can be a little sad. But then you go to places like South Africa, and you go to Cape Town, which has lost a lot of Jews, we know. But then you go and you find the Reformed Synagogue down in Cape Town, and it's wonderful. It's thriving. People are having a great time. You go to Uganda and you see the Abu Adaya, this community of Jews that was almost completely decimated by Idi Amin and is now recovered and is vibrant and engaging and is finally connected with the West. So they're becoming more educated. You go to places like Canada, which you think is going to be exactly like American Judaism, but then you notice there are a lot of differences. It's right next door. And yet they have a very similar view of the world Jewishly, but they also have a very different view. Or you go to Mexico, which is basically 5 minutes from where I grew up, but of course the Mexican Jewish population is very different than the American Jewish population. They are very, very connected. Every Jew in Monterrey or Mexico City knows every Jew there because the communities are locked in, and it's really quite beautiful. The kids would come up to camp, so I met them all through there. So the world is a beautiful place, and we always learn more and more, but the essential truth is that Jews have lived everywhere and still live everywhere. And it's nice to see and go and check out what other Jewish communities were like in the past, but also how current Jewish communities view the world similarly and also differently.
When you came to Savannah, was there anything that you consider really unique about this particular community of Jews?
Well, I think one, it was really quite unique being from the actual South, coming to a place that called itself the South, but it's, snows sometimes. So that was interesting. How could it be the South when I'm from the South? But what I found was interesting is, whenever I go in for rabbinical conferences or when I was in school, they always ask, where are you from? And everybody tells where they're from, and New York and Florida or LA and Chicago, and I say I'm from McAllen, Texas. And I'm like, oh my God, they're Jews in Texas? They just don't understand it. But when I come to Georgia, although Texas is not really considered part of the Old South, Georgia loves Texas. People in here in Georgia, you're from Texas. Oh, that's fabulous. They respect people from Texas because, I guess we fought together in the War of Northern Aggression. So Texas is not part of the South officially, but it's kind of like the cousin we like. So it's been nice that I've come here because there's a lot of differences in the South, but there's also a lot of similarities to coming from Texas. Nice people, very welcoming, very supportive.
Is there something that Mikveh Israel has taught you about being a Jew that you hadn't seen anywhere else?
Oh yeah, well, Mikveh Israel is a unique place. It's a wonderful congregation like many others with wonderful people, and I think you find these type of congregations all over. But I think the history helps to set it apart. I mean, the dedication to the history that predates most of the immigration patterns of Jews to America is really amazing, and people here love the history. But it's not only the history we concentrate on, it's the fact that it continues today. That this is a vibrant community that has been a vibrant community for a very long time. And so this connection to the past, plus the fact that so many people, thousands of people want to come and visit. So in other synagogues, you have some traffic during the day, especially if you have like a daycare or a preschool. But here we have traffic all the time because we have so many tourists, so it just makes it a hopping place, nonstop, never a down moment. And that's really nice because it just feels vibrant. The vibrancy here is off the charts. So it makes us unique, and I think we're unique for many other ways, but I think history is certainly the area that sets us apart from most synagogues.
So much of our history as Jewish people is just devastating. There isn't a day you can't pick where something tragic or terrible didn't happen. When you look back at the last generation, the numbers right after World War II, the baby boomers were phenomenal, and the Jewish community was thriving. Now, when things have eased up, you don't want to give the children only the negatives of the past, but they don't seem to be sticking to the story of why it's important to maintain your Jewish identity. And we look at the numbers both in Jewish schools and in the Jewish Community Center and in Jewish organizations. What do you see as the future? How can we engage our young people to understand what is special, unique, or wonderful about standing with the Jewish people and becoming active?
Well, I think you fit the nose on the head, or the head on the nose. Nose on the head? Yes. When Jews were stuck in shtetls or ghettos, or not ostracized, but sort of, kind of forced into their own little communes in America. We love living in America. We know there was a gentleman's agreement. You could foster this idea of us against the world. Jews are hated. We have to stick together. You could center the whole Jewish world on the Holocaust and the horrors of that. However, the youth of today and people of my generation probably to today don't feel that way, because anti-Semitism is something we've heard of, and something we may have seen here and there, but by and large we haven't lived it. By and large our friends are not Jewish. By and large we go to schools where we have the option of being in every club, and nobody's going to keep us out of any club unless we're not good enough. If I want to be on the football team, the coach is not going to prevent me from being on the football team if I'm good enough. He's just not going to do it. If I want to be in the play, I'm going to be in the play if I'm good enough. Now, there's always going to be exceptions and favoritism here and there, but because you're Jewish is not usually going to play into it. So if we want to create a narrative for this generation and the next one and the next one, it's going to have to be something more positive. We're Jewish because it is fabulous to be Jewish, because it's an amazing religion. Now, we don't forget about the past. We do not forget about the horrors that happened and the difficulties, but we also don't center our whole religion around them. The Holocaust, of course, is beyond belief, one of the worst thing that's ever happened to Jews. But we also look at all the wonderful things. We live in a great country. Jews have thrived. Jews have had great periods in time. In the last 2,000 years, there's been a lot of terrible things. There's a lot of good things as well. Today, we're Jewish because it's a beautiful religion, great theological belief system, great ethical values. We center our religion on the family. There's a lot of creative programming going out there. We've got camps. We've got study sessions. If you want to be a Jewish athlete, you can be on a Jewish athletic team at a Jewish day school. If you want to be a scholar, you can be a scholar. If you want to be a yeshiva guy, you can be a yeshiva guy. There's no limits. So I think we concentrate on the positives, the great things, the exciting things, although we never forget the tragedies. And so it's finding that balance. And I think the balance may have gone too far one way before, and now we've got to rebalance it. And I think we're beginning to do so.
There's two more. You've been very patient. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think about Judaism in the South. I mean, what we see of Judaism in the South is something not unique because it is old and in many ways predates the North, but it's a conundrum for a lot of people because a lot of people believe Jews are in the big cities, mostly in the Northeast, California, Florida, Chicago, but we find Jewish enclaves all over the place. The fact that we're in a town of 125,000 people, the nearest large city is Charleston, which is not that large, it's 2.5 hour ways. The nearest really large city is Atlanta, which is 5 hours away. And yet we have this thriving Jewish community with 3 synagogues and a federation and a Jewish community center we call the JEA is amazing. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we are not only Jewish, but we are very Jewish, very tied to our Jewish roots and to our Jewish future. And I think if you go across the South in small cities, a lot of times the Jew store is closed, but you'll still find places where Jews congregating, creating vibrant communities, and I think we're one of them. We have 4,000 Jews in Savannah. It's a population of 125,000 people. That's pretty good, but you would think it was a lot more because Jews are involved in every way of, every club, every organization, every committee in this whole city. You'll find Jewish people there, often helping to found the community or the organization. So I think that's incredible, and I think Israel and our connection to Israel is the chief issue in many respects today, because there's only 2 large Jewish communities, Israel and America, and sometimes I think the gap between us is getting larger, and I think it's something we need to work on because I think Israel does not have a good persona in the media, unfortunately. I think wrongly so. And it's something we need to work on is how do we connect to Israel more, since we're really the only 2 large communities, but we're very different. You'd think we'd be more alike. They're both democracies, both very technologically savvy communities, both filled with very well, people who thrive in Jewish world, but the Judaism they practice over there is in many ways very different. They're the majority. Religion is instilled in the government and everything you do. Where in America, Jews are in the minority, but we're very free to do whatever we want. In America, we don't have the pressures of going into the army if we don't want to, or having, we have two giant oceans that protect us. Where Israel, of course, has enemies all around us and is constantly fighting for what they hope will be peace in the future. America, although demonized often in the world media, is still the most powerful country, and still the world sees us doing a lot of good things, where Israel does a lot of good things in the world, is a really tiny country, but you only really see the negative in the media. So how do we bridge this gap? How do we grow? I think Birthright has probably done more for that than anything else in recent memory. But I think there needs to be more, connection between Israel and America, especially Jewishly.
And lastly, give me a snippet of wisdom that you think is the essence of what it means to be Jewish. Something that you hope you leave as a legacy to the generation to follow.
Well, I think for me, Judaism is always about community. It's being connected to your community ethically, spiritually, theologically, physically if possible. And I think we're finding it. I am very hopeful. A lot of people dwell in the negative. I dwell in the positive. We live in a great country. We got lots of freedoms. Israel, the other big Jewish community, as a democracy, it's strong enough to protect itself against any outside force. We have friends in America who are non-Jewish who support us. We have the opportunity to learn and grow and go into any profession. And I'm finding that even though the Jewish world was losing a lot of Jews, that I think the Jews that are staying in the Jewish world are becoming more educated, more dedicated, and falling in love with Judaism in a very positive way. So I think for us, what is Judaism? Judaism is being connected to your community, spiritually, theologically, physically, emotionally, in a very positive, exciting way, even as we stay connected to our past. It's about us being connected to other people as we're connected to God, as we're connected to the Torah, as we're connected to Israel. So I think there's no one way of explaining Judaism. I think it's a giant hodgepodge.
Rabbi, thank you very much.
Thank you.